What up, y'all? Appreciate you showing up, hanging out, listening to my dumb ass. Like and subscribe. So, there's a couple of things. This is kind of a continuation of the last video where we were talking about how Hellblade 2, how fabulous it is, how everybody's sweating it and stuff. The main thing, of course, is the donkey unicorns and the ponies are complaining about something, right? What are they complaining about? 30 frames. Now, my argument is that if it's a cinematic type of game, it's not a first-person shooter, and it's not multiplayer, then 30 frames is fine because you're doing cinematic experience. And the cinematic experience is closer to 24 frames, which is movies, than it is 60. Because I remember going to see The Hobbit at 48 frames a second, which is double 24, and that shit looked whack as hell. I didn't like it. I was like, oh, hell to the nah. This is not enjoyable. So I don't want to see anything that is trying to replicate real life live action above 30 frames at least. You know, if they did it at 24 frames, I wouldn't be mad because it would be closer to movies. But anyway, 30 frames, perfectly acceptable. As far as what the resolution is, I have no idea. We'll see what Digital Foundry finds out with that stuff. But, you know, my thing is, and something that I've noticed, and I believe I did mention this in the past, in yesterday's video, but I want to reiterate it. Unreal Engine 5 is leading the way for next-gen games. Look at Sony's games. None of their first party uses Unreal Engine 5. And that's a deficit to PlayStation because if you look at their games, I saw somebody on Twitter today, I forgot who it was, but they said, looking back on the Spider-Man 2 trailer, I realized that it really doesn't look that good. It's cool, but it doesn't look that good. Thanks, Hellblade 2. Hellblade 2 ruined games for me, or whatever they said. And that's what you do. Look at the Spider-Man 2 trailer. You see the facial models, the lighting and stuff. You see Miles' face with his... And you see Pete. You see, I guess Harry was there. Harry Osborn. You see Mary Jane. Right? You see all those characters. You see them jumping around. Blah, blah, blah. You see the city. And then you look at Hellblade and it's like, this is that is a generational leap. The reason why... Because Spider-Man 2 was built on a PlayStation 4 engine. It's not built on a next-gen engine. It's built on an old engine. That's how they can spit these games out so quickly, is because they're using the same old technology. They're just adding more sprites, if you will. You know what I'm saying? They're adding more frames, or they're, you know, the resolution is higher, or they're doing ray trace reflections. You know, stuff like that. They're adding little things that make the game, yes, look better than the PlayStation 4 version, but ultimately it's still the PlayStation 4 version. Just because it's not on PlayStation 4, that's a choice that Sony and PlayStation made not to put it on there to fool the public into believing that this is actually a native PlayStation 5 game. Only because they didn't do a PlayStation 4 version, which it is. That's what, I mean, we can go back to the beginning of this generation. How are they having all these games ready and Xbox doesn't have any games ready? Because they was using PlayStation 4 dev kits, basically. The PlayStation 5 dev kit, just two PlayStation 4 dev kits duct taped together. That's all. Look, that's the only way that you can explain why or how they were able to do it. And then you realize, oh, most of these games are crushed in. How is that possible? Because it's a PlayStation 4 game. That's how. They're not going to make a bespoke PlayStation 5 version and then magically have a PlayStation 4 version. No, that's not how it works. So, y'all ponies and donkey unicorns were bamboozled and fooled. You know, just look at Ratchet and Clank. They're like, oh, only with the power of the SSD, right? Nope. That joint was running on an old rickety freaking 5400 RPM hard drive. Not even an SSD, a hard drive. It was still working. I mean, it worked like it was trash, but it ran. And you would expect it to run like trash, but it ran. And on a faster hard drive, 10,000, it ran. A little stutter here and there, but it ran. So they definitely lied multiple times. This whole generation. Sony's been lying. You know, and the ponies don't care. They just want to be on the winning team. But that's changing. You know, whether they like it or not, it's changing. And so they could be like, oh, PlayStation still has better, they're saying more of the first party PlayStation games are 60 frames and Xbox aren't. And I'm like, that's because they're PlayStation 4 games. That's why. If your game is running at 720p and it's PlayStation 4 game, it better run at 60 frames or something's really wrong with the PlayStation 5. I think King said that. King had mentioned that. I was like, you know, he's right. So, I reiterate that. And so I didn't come up with that. But still, the notion makes sense. And yes, I agree with that. And that's how, you know, the Nintendo Switch does games at freaking 60 frames, if it is at that, because the resolution's so low, you know. And then the PlayStation 5 Pro is like, oh, we're doing this PSSR, super PlayStation superlative sampling rates or whatever, super speed, super rate, or whatever. And I'm like, so they're going to have games at like 720p and upscale it to 4K and pretend that it's 4K, and that's how they're going to get 60 frames? I mean, that's a trend. That's like what all this DLSSR, SSR, and PRSSR, and FSSR, FSR, all those S's and R's. That's what all they're doing. It's AI, super fancy upscaling. And so, you know, it's weird that these ponies and donkey unicorns, they're changing. They change their narratives. They change just to suit, just to win. And Sony plays into that too. They play into that narrative and they do things to help that narrative be what it is in order to look like they are the winners or are winning. But when you break it down, if you break it down by every metric, they are losing. They're winning one metric, and even that's a little shady because, to be honest, I don't think anybody believes the words or the numbers that Sony's given because they've been kind of diabolical with it. But, you know, thinking back on the 30 frames versus 60 frames, like I said, the cinematic nature of that game and the fact that everybody's sweating it so hard, 30 frames seems like, you know, the option, of course, is always welcome. It's always better to have the option of 60 and 30. But if it means lesser fidelity, then I'll go for the fidelity because that type of game is literally a narrative movie type game, a cinematic experience. It's probably the most cinematic experience type game than any game before it. You look at the Uncharted, you look at The Last of Us and all that stuff. This game is the benchmark, like I said last video. And so these ponies and donkey unicorns pretending that, oh, it's not 60 frames, so it's trash, but they can't really do that. They can't really say that because all of the media is sweating this game. And they see how awesome it is. And there, even IGN was like, I don't remember the last time I was so excited to play the full version of a game. And it's like, this is the best game I've ever seen in my whole entire life. This is the benchmark. There was nothing negative except from, I think, Eurogamer. They're like, oh, it's only 30 frames and the dude, one of the co-founders, is leaving. And I'm like, first of all, he was trying to leave like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. When Hellblade 1 was done, he was like, I'm out. But Microsoft was like, yo, we're going to pay some extra little change so you can stay on, supervise, make sure this next game is good, and then you can bounce. And that's what happened. He stayed on to make sure that the team was straight, they were in the right direction, they had, you know, new and better, you know, people, not better, but just the right people in the right places as far as leadership and direction. And that's good. That's a smart thing to do. And, you know, Microsoft paid him. It's like, yo, man, we got to pay you, you know, 6 figures. Let's go. All you got to do is kind of be there, supervise, make sure, you know, the ship is right for the next generation. That's smart. That's business smartness. Instead of oh, he's leaving, everybody's leaving, close the studio down. Something that Sony would do, because they don't care about nurturing the industry or nurturing their studios. They just care about the bottom line, making money. It used to be different at PlayStation, but now this is the situation that ponies and donkey unicorns find themselves in. This is what Sony is. This is what PlayStation is today. And so now, back in the day, people used to say, the devs used to say, we like Sony because they embrace creativity and all of the. Not anymore. Sorry, that those days are gone, and y'all are asked out of luck. That's not what it is anymore. So I don't know what to tell you, but that's not it. If you want something like that, either create your own indie studio or holler at Microsoft. Maybe they got some change for you or something, or create a new studio and sign up for, try to get on Game Pass or something, But Sony's not that anymore. Sony has changed so much just in this generation. I mean, the writing was on the wall since last generation, since they did what they did. But Hiroki Totoki sees it, and they're like, how? It's like, if I was Hiroki Totoki, I would look at PlayStation, and I'm like, how did y'all let it get to this point? How did y'all not know that this was just a train wreck, dumpster fire, destined to fail? You're looking at all the different, like, I am still convinced that Jim Ryan was the worst CEO of the PlayStation history. He was the worst because he put out multiple trash failure hardwares. He put out a portable PlayStation that was the worst version out of all of the different portable PlayStations. Jim Ryan's portable PlayStation was the worst version. Look, at this point, he was worse than Don Matrick. Because at least Don Matrick was like, Kinect, like the first version of Kinect, that was Don Matrick too, right? So, well, yeah, I believe that was him. That was his kind of first thing when he came in. Because Phil, what was his name? He's doing soccer now. But he what's his name? Phil something? Peter Moore, sorry. Peter Moore. Peter Moore was a very good CEO, Microsoft. He was cool. I mean, he had the right attitude. He had the presence. I mean, I don't think he was a coder or anything like that. He was a straight CEO, but he was likable. He know how to speak to the public. It was just kind of a vibe with him. And that was cool. And I think they took that and they said, all right, fine. We get Don Matrick in there. He's a businessman. He knows how to make money. He knows how to make money. So he basically copied that Nintendo vibe. He did an okay job. It wasn't the best, but he did an okay job. And then he blew it with the Xbox One. By being too much of a businessman and not understanding gamers and what was happening in gaming at the time and technology. He messed that up. And so when they hired Phil for the role, that was the best thing that Microsoft could have done. And I've heard recently in a podcast that these people in charge, these CEOs, need to understand and have experience, at least, in the gaming side of video games. If you're going to be a video game CEO, you have to understand video games, not just business, not just making money from a product, video games. And so that's why Gabe Newell is such a successful, I would say, CEO of Steam, because he used to work for Microsoft. At what capacity? I would assume he was a coder. I don't know. Correct me on that. But when you work for a tech company like that, like I said, I don't know. Maybe he was not a coder, or maybe he wasn't. But so that's a tentative. Maybe I have to retract that later. But in the terms of, as far as Phil is concerned, Phil Spencer, he is a coder. He coded many different programs for Microsoft, for Windows, Encarta and some other stuff too. I don't know if he did any games per se, but he did code. He made stuff work on Windows. And he's a gamer. he's got many multiple hundreds, probably thousands of hours of gaming in. And so, you know, that's what is needed for a modern day CEO to successfully guide a video game company. You have to understand, you have to be in there in the trenches. Unless you're just like an uber genius and you can kind of see and relate, but at the same time, you still would probably have the experience of video games, understand video games, and at least play a little bit of video games. Like Elon Musk. I mean, hate him or love him or hate him, whatever your opinion is about him. He is a very smart man, you know, probably genius level, who knows. He also plays video games. You know, does that make him smarter because he plays video games? Well, when it comes to understanding gamer culture and behavior and such, yes. Because he's not just thinking about how they work and all those things, or he's not just thinking about making money off of gamers. He's understanding the culture more than a Jim Ryan would. And so, you know, you translate that to Phil, who's been in the game he's been in the 80s. He's started, I believe, with Microsoft. I don't remember the exact year, but, you know, closing in on 40 years for Phil Spencer at Microsoft, his experience. So, you know, Phil Spencer outlasted, I think, 2 Sony CEOs at this point. Anyway, tangent, sorry about that. But the 30 frames versus 60 frames, cinematic, it's the best looking game. Ponies have nothing, they don't have a leg to stand on. They turn it into glue. They at the glue factory about to get chopped up. You know, they got no argument. So when somebody says, when somebody's giving you an argument, a pony's giving you an argument, Donkey Unicorn is giving you an argument about 60 frames, just be like, I don't even need to listen to you. Because if you talk about Hellblade and 60 frames, no, that's not, no. Because we can go back to a bunch of games that are on PlayStation, like first wave PlayStation 5 games. Are they, any of them 60 frames? Probably not. They struggling to do 40 frames on, I think it was Spider-Man. Oh, 40 frames and barely ray tracing and all this stuff. I'm like, and y'all think the PS5 Pro is going to be better when the clock speed is basically what the Xbox Series S is? So it's just going to be the same whack looking PlayStation 5 game, but it'll be 60 frames instead of 30 frames, basically, because you need that. Well, I don't even think they can do that, because what they're pumping up in the PlayStation 5 Pro is the GPU stuff, and that has nothing to do with frame rate. So they can have higher resolution, but the same frame rate. So the more you think about what the PlayStation 5 Pro is, the worse it gets for Sony and ponies and Donkey Unicorns, and the more you realize you don't need that piece of hot trash garbage. Also, it's going to be bigger. It's going to be at least the same size as the first version of the PlayStation 5. Might be bigger, because they're overclocking a overclock. It just makes no sense. Anyway, I'm rambling. I appreciate y'all hanging out, showing me my dumb ass. Like and subscribe. Hit me up in the comments below. What do you think? Do you prefer 60 frames? Do you prefer 30 frames? And the context, of course, is what games do you prefer 60 frames? What games do you prefer 30 frames? For me, real quick, if it's a first-person shooter or a racing game or any multiplayer game, PvP, 60 frames at least. You know what I'm saying? But if it's a cinematic single-player game, it doesn't matter. It could be freaking 24 frames. It could be 30 frames. Well, let's just say 30 frames with a nice, even frame time. Then let's go. With no judders and jitters, then let's go. It's fine. That's fine, because it's cinematic and it's just your experience. It's not affected by anything else. So, yeah. But anyway, I'll see y'all guys on the next one. And everything took away.